All right, we're on page 198, which is Siman Pei Beis, beginning of Siman Pei Beis in the Hebrew one. All right. What's nice about, even though the Ramchal is talking about kind of deep topics, he does it in a very methodical, step-by-step way, so it makes it easier for us to understand. It's a very logical progression of ideas. So just to remind ourselves where we are in this ladder of ideas, we were talking about the two attributes of Hashem, how he uses those two attributes to create the world, to run the world, and how the human being is a reflection of those two attributes. So those two attributes are called Hester Panim and Giloi Panim. Hester Panim is when Hashem hides himself, quote unquote. We can't readily detect his presence or the fact that he's running the world. Giloi Panim is the opposite. It's Hashem is directly dealing with the world, and we recognize that he is running everything, and that we recognize his perfection and we recognize his oneness. Now, we said that the human being is a composite and is a reflection of these two attributes. The human body is a reflection of, was created through Hester Panim, the physical, whereas the spiritual, the neshama, the soul, was created through Giloi Panim, through Hashem's direct, it's a reflection of Hashem's direct attribute. And we said while the body has many different parts, just like Hester Panim, the way Hashem interacts with the world has many different ways. There's many different ways that God interacts with the world, the ways he can punish, reward, things like that. So to the body has many different limbs that have different jobs. Whereas the soul, and when Hashem deals with the world in Giloi Panim, in direct oneness, that's like one. Hashem deals directly, there aren't separate parts, it's just Hashem, like, okay, I don't know exactly how it works. We say his hashpa, but it's one hashpa. It doesn't have separate parts. Where the world recognizes that Hashem is one, and so to the soul is just one. The soul is one, and then we talked about how the soul interacts with the body because these are two opposites. So how could it be? So we said that the soul, we say that the soul sees, but the soul isn't really seeing because the soul doesn't have eyes. But through its connection to the body, we say the soul sees, even though the soul doesn't have eyes. Now we're going to talk more about the relationship between the body and the soul, how that changes through different times in human history, and how it could even change in a person's life.
I'm just asking for confirmation again. So either the neshama, the soul is really one thing. It's only one, but somehow in the body it has different. There, the body is split into different things, even though it's all
right
dependent on the soul, which is really only has that one.
Right.
Somehow it gets split up in the body. Whatever, not split up, but there's different.
Right, different. He was comparing it to the same thing as Hashem. Hashem is one. We have no comprehension of his essence, of God's essence, but we know that he chooses to deal with the world with kindness, with anger, with justice. So there are multiple ways that God deals with the world, but even though in his essence he's just one. And that we can't comprehend that. So he was comparing that to the soul. The soul is just one, and he said also we can't comprehend the essence of the soul. But the soul will interact with the body, it sounds like in those specific ways. Okay, so let's continue. So now that's building up to it. Now we're going to go more into this topic. Amar Seichel. Now remember, this is a conversation between the Seichel, the intellect, and the soul. Amar Seichel. Ata tzrichan anu lavo hadragas zmani haneshama v'haguf. Now we need to talk about the periods that the body and the soul go through. And these different stages. We mentioned earlier that there's different stages of human history, so the way the body and soul are going to interact with each other are going to be different. But we need to have another introduction before we begin. It's obvious there are many details and laws that are necessary to complete a human being and the creation in the world in all of the different times. We already said, Rabus Asisa At Hashem Elokai Niflaosecha Umachshvaisecha. Much have you made, Hashem, your wonders and your thoughts. V'nemar, it says, Ma'gadlu Masecha Hashem, how great are your handiworks, O Lord. Ma'rabu Masecha Hashem, how many are your handiworks, O Lord. Using the Art Scroll translation. Al Kopanim, so there's many details to the way Hashem made the world and human beings, a lot of different things that have to come into play. Al Kopanim, however, these details has to be that they have general rules that apply to these details. Va'klalim lo yeh kol kach. Now, when it comes to the general rules, there are not going to be so many of them. Avol prateim hem shiu rabim, but the details is going to be a lot. That's necessary for all of creation. So we're just saying that Hashem made a lot of different things that is necessary for the completeness of a human being and for the world. There's a lot of details, but there are a few klalim, a few general rules. And all the details are under these general rules. Amr Haneshama, says the soul. This is for sure true. Ain pratim she'ein aleim klalim. You don't have details that don't have general rules that they're umbrellaed underneath. Masha pratim yagim hadas lekaptzam, and that which the mind is very difficult to understand all the details. Haklalim nochem heimelav lekablasam, but the general rules that we can understand. Right? You have many details. That's it's hard to remember those, but a human being is easier for him to understand these general rules. Al kain achar klalim tzarich lirdof v'lo achar pratim. So therefore, let's try to understand the general rules and not the details. All right. So we have an easier task than just having to know all the details of how Hashem made creation, the human being. We're just going to learn the general rules. If you want the details, then I guess you have to, I don't know. Amar HaSeichel, says the intellect, V'kach Amru Chazal, this is what the sages tell us, La'olam Yudivrei Torah b'yadcha klalim v'lo pratim. When a person's studying Torah, he should endeavor to know the general rules of Torah, and not only the details.
I have no idea what that means.
What?
I have no idea what that means.
And the Sifrei Hazinu. So it's interesting, he adds the
he should know the general rules and not the details.
Yeah.
No, so the way he translates it here is not just the details. I think he's saying that, it's important to know, you could just know a bunch of details and you don't have them organized in your head at all. I think he's saying to know the general rules, so you know first start with the general rules, so you know the general idea of what's going on, then you can fill in the details. If you just have a bunch of details and you don't know the general rules, then you don't have any organization in your head.
The details are very important to follow the general rules.
Right, yeah. But what if you just have a bunch of details like the general rules?
I'm with you.
I have no idea what this means.
I think he's.
You can't have one without the other. It's like.
No, but I think he's emphasizing that you should have the general rules. Don't just learn details. That's what I think.
You don't only learn details. You should also categorize them.
I think that's what he means.
And then you could maybe.
Because details.
You can't separate either argument. You have to have both of them together. Otherwise, it's.
What's more important, though?
No, you can't say one's more important than the other. Yeah. No, I'm with you, Rabbi Stewart.
If you have a bunch of details and you don't know what they mean.
But I'm not saying one is not more important than the other. Like, you have to have both together at once, to have the details and the general rules. Because if you just have the general rules, then it's meaningless unless you have the details.
Why is it meaningless?
Well, it's not meaningless, but it's
a general rule is that Hashem is one, but you don't know all the details how it works.
But you need the details to follow the general rules, and you need the general rules to follow the details. Like,
if you don't have, you always have a definition and a proof.
Right.
Details to us is a proof. If you don't have proof, it endangers a whole definition. Your natural will questions a whole definition.
But what's the point of proof without a definition? It's meaningless.
No, we are not saying it's meaningless. You're right. You proof itself will be meaningless, but at the same time, if you don't have proof and you just have definition, naturally you question the definition.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's talking about proof here. He's talking about the.
You can't win. You have to have both. I mean, you can't win that argument by saying one or the other. Like one or the other is more important because they're both important at the same time. You have to master both of them.
Yeah, they're definitely important, but I think if you would say, okay, I'll have to think about it. We'll have to get a Sifrei Hazinu, Lama Beis Beis, and look there and see what the Mefarshim there say. Okay, fine. I hear your points, but for now, let's go on. Nachzor l'nyanenu, let's return to our topic. As he says, Hine, Reis kvar hayos shtei midos lo yizbarach shmo, hester panim ve'aris panim. We have two attributes of Hashem. Hester panim is hiding himself, ve'aris panim, Hashem revealing himself. Ein hema shorish v'siba laguf u'lenshama. They are the root and reason for the body and the soul, like we mentioned. We have to understand these two attributes. Each one individually. And all of its details. See, now he says you have to know the details. That are underneath these klalim, these general rules. In order to understand the soul and the body. Each one individually, and all the details. And like he says, yes, we really have to know what he meant before. But no, we have to know. Now he's saying we have to know the details. We have to know what he meant. It's a little. We're having like a very general conversation, but we don't know what he calls klalim, and we don't know what he calls pratim. We don't know what he calls general rules. We don't know what he calls details. And it could be that he. Okay, so you're right. We'll have to needs further investigation.
Okay.
And after we know these things, we have to know more. These two midos of Hester Panim, of Hashem hiding himself, and Giloi Panim, and revealing himself, they interact to make how Hashem runs the world. There's nothing that doesn't have a place for these two attributes. A Hester beis Galia, hiding himself, the Hester in the open, Ha'ara beis Kasya, and the Ha'ara in the being closed. Like we explained earlier. After this, I'm not sure actually what he means here by, what does it mean, Hester beis Galia? He's like combining the two, and then Ha'ara beis Kasya. I wasn't sure what he meant. After, and then after, we're going to see about the connection of these two midos, when one overpowers the other. So now he's going to summarizing. We need to know three things. The idea of these two attributes, Zula Atzma, independently. So we have to understand Hester Panim, Hashem hiding himself, and Hashem revealing himself independently, which we've kind of already discussed. Yedias Chiburam, Lepoel Tamid Gam Yachad, how they connect together. Right? Sometimes there's a connection of these two attributes. Yedias Hatolados, Hanoldos Min HaChibur Hazel Minaim, and what comes out, the result of what happens when they connect. Lefi Hisgaber Behem Hester Ha'ara, when the Hester or the Ha'ara overpowers the other one. So these are the three ideas now which we're going to discuss. One is independently Hester Panim and Ha'aras Panim. Two is how they connect. And three is the result of what happens when they connect. We'll stop here, but he's going to say an example of what's the result of how they connect is a human being. A human being says the Ziv Panim, the countenance on a person's face. Says Hester Panim, that's the body. Because the body, a person doesn't have just the body, there's no countenance on his face, a dead person. There's no countenance on the face. But a soul, just the soul, you can't see the countenance on a soul. Countenance is a physical thing. But if with the combination, that's how it presents itself. So the countenance you see in a person's face is a reflection of the person's soul. Something I've mentioned many, many times is a photographer of big rabbis told my Rashiva that sometimes she's able to capture the radiance of the big rabbi's faces on film, but not always. But she sees, when she sees these big rabbis, there's something on the face that you can't really explain. The Ramchal is saying that's a reflection of the person's soul. You see Jewish kids learning in yeshiva, learning in cheder, learning Beis Yaakov. There's something, there's something there in their faces. You can't put your finger on it, but that's a spiritual. It's a reflection. What he's going to say, we'll learn next week. That's a reflection of the interaction between the body and the soul. And he's going to talk about how even in a person's life, if the soul detaches, that can affect a person. I shouldn't say detaches, weakens. This connection weakens. It's very, very interesting. Okay, so we'll have to figure out that other thing.